Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're doing something a little different. We aren't going to look at the central bank as just some stuffy, inaccessible institution full of people in suits. Instead, I want you to picture the central bank as, well, the master plumber of our entire economy. And in this giant plumbing system, the water flowing through the pipes, that's credit, the money available for borrowing. So how exactly does this plumber keep the water flowing perfectly without bursting the pipes or, leaving the whole house entirely dry? Let's find out.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just imagine your own house's plumbing for a second. If you want to increase or decrease the water pressure for the entire house, what do? You head down to the basement and turn the main water valve. But what if you just need to wash some dishes? You definitely wouldn't crank up the main valve for the whole property just for that. Instead, you just turn on the kitchen sink faucet to target that one specific area. Well, the central bank operates exactly the same way when they're managing the economy's credit.
And that brings us to our very first method. Think of quantitative credit control as our main water valve. The central bank uses these tools to control the total volume and the cost of credit across the entire economy. And here's the key. They do it strictly without any discrimination. It essentially turns the overall credit pressure up or down for absolutely everyone. It doesn't matter if that money is going to a giant multinational corporation, a small family farm, or just someone buying a used car. The whole house feels the pressure change.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how they actually do it. The central bank has a few heavy-hitting tools to turn that massive main valve. First up, there's the bank rate, or the repo rate. By adjusting this, they basically make borrowing either more or less expensive for all commercial banks across the board. Next, we have open market operations. This is when the central bank buys or sells government securities, which literally injects cash right into or absorbs cash straight out of the entire banking system. And finally, they use reserve ratios, like the cash reserve ratio. This basically dictates the exact percentage of deposits that banks absolutely cannot lend out. When the central bank adjusts any of these, boom, it changes the total lending capacity of the whole country.
But here's a really critical question for you to think about. What if we only want to water the garden? What if the central bank looks at the system and says, hey, the overall credit volume is absolutely fine, but way too much money is pouring into risky, speculative stuff, and nowhere near enough is flowing towards socially useful purposes? If they just go and turn that main valve, they'd flood the whole house just to get the garden wet. Clearly, we need a totally different approach here.
So, the crucial point is, this is exactly where qualitative credit control steps in. These tools are designed not to change the total volume of money, but to regulate the specific use and the actual direction of that credit. They strategically pull funds away from those speculative uses and steer them right toward targeted, beneficial purposes. These are our master plumber's individual faucets. They allow the central bank to send credit strictly to the kitchen or strictly to the garden, completely without messing with the pressure in the rest of the house.
So let's build out the rest of our toolkit. How exactly do they direct this flow in the real world? Well, they can do it by adjusting margin requirements. If the central bank raises the margin on loans against certain securities, they instantly put a lid on speculative borrowing in that specific market by lowering the maximum loan amount. They can also use the regulation of consumer credit to dictate down payments on specific goods. On top of that, they can implement credit rationing to strictly limit who actually gets those funds. Or, they can simply use something called moral suasion. That's basically just persuading and advising commercial banks to carefully guide their lending in a certain direction. These all act as those highly targeted faucets.
And this brilliantly illustrates the complete dual strategy of the central bank. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. On one hand, we have the broad, sweeping, quantitative tools. That's the main valve managing total volume and fighting off nationwide inflation or deflation. And then, on the other hand, we have the precision, qualitative tools, the targeted faucets directing the flow of that money to where it does the absolute most good and preventing those dangerous speculative bubbles. To do the job right, the master plumber absolutely needs both the volume control and the directional control to maintain a perfectly balanced economic flow.
It really is a delicate balancing act, and it's one that directly affects the interest rates on your loans, the prices you pay at the grocery store, and just the overall health of the entire nation's economy. So I want to leave you with this to think about. Take a look at the economic climate around you today. If you were the master plumber right now facing today's totally unique challenges, which valve would you turn first? The main volume or the targeted direction? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning how the flow is managed all around you.